Would you like to have access to $1 million tax-free when you're retired? It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to go into the gray area of the tax law. So let's jump in and talk about this. Let's go for a walk. So many of you know the strategy is going to involve a Roth IRA. Roth IRAs can be super powerful. You do not get a tax deduction when you put money into a Roth IRA, right? You put after-tax dollars into a Roth IRA, but then the earnings grow tax-free. And then if you meet the requirements, which is basically have the account over 5 years and be over 59 and a half, then all the money comes out tax-free as well under the current tax law. But how do you get $1 million? And not just $1 million in a quarter of a century, right? $1 million 25 years from now is not really $1 million. That's like $500,000. So how do you go about doing this? I'm going to talk about that, but first let me tell you a little bit about Roth IRAs and some things that you need to know. You can take out your contributions anytime without paying penalties and without paying taxes. So that's a really powerful thing. I should preface all of this saying I am not an accountant. I want to put this on your radar screen as something for you to research if having access to $1 million tax-free is something that's important to you. There are strategies to do it. You don't have to bend the tax law. You can just plain vanilla and make it happen. But if this is something that's interesting to you, I encourage you to do your own research and probably talk to an accountant that can give you the specifics. But let me share some information that'll help you out and high level decide if it's something you want to explore further, okay? So there are no required minimum distributions from a Roth IRA. And then under 59 and a half, as far as withdrawals before you get to 59 and a half, if you're under 59 and a half and you've owned the Roth IRA has been open over 4 years, the earnings might be subject to taxes and penalties, but there are some exceptions. You can take out up to $10,000 for your first-time home purchase. There are exceptions for qualified educational expenses. There's exceptions for the birth of a child, expenses related to the birth of a child or an adoption, and there's some exceptions for medical expenses, specifically non-reimbursed medical expenses. Okay, if you're under 59 and a half, but you've had the account open 5 years, over 5 years, the above exemptions also hold. And if for some reason you were to become disabled, you can take out your money without the taxes and penalties. Again, talk to a tax accountant on this. Double check these numbers. Also, some cautions. If you're transferring from one custodian to the next, like Charles Schwab to Fidelity or vice versa, and I'm not recommending those custodians, but just be careful. You want to ask for a custodian to custodian transfer. If you're transferring those accounts, particularly as the account grows, because this is real money. Because if you get a physical check, you have 60 days to get that check, to deposit that check in with the new custodian. And if you go on vacation and you forget about that, it's going to count as a withdrawal, and it can be really hard, if not impossible, to reverse that. So something to be aware of. Okay, last one, and then we'll jump into the strategy of how to have $1 million in today's dollars in your Roth IRA when you retire. The income limits, unfortunately, not anybody can open a Roth IRA, but there are ways around this, so stay tuned, and I'm going to talk about that. So the income limits in 2023, if you make less, if you're single, if you file single and you're not married, if you make less than $138,000 a year, you'll be able to contribute the full amount to a Roth IRA. And if you're married filing jointly and collectively you make under $218,000, so this is married filing jointly. And then here's where it ends. So it starts phasing out at those numbers, and it ends at $153,000 for single people and $228,000 for married filing jointly people. So these are numbers as of 2023. You know, this video is probably going to be on YouTube for a long time. So be sure to look up what those income limits are for your specific situation. But those are the numbers. So let's jump in. How do you start getting real money into a Roth IRA? And particularly if you're a higher income earner. And really one of the best strategies for that is a Roth 401k. Let me turn the page here. Is basically what's called a backdoor Roth conversion, and you can look that up. That's a pretty common term. Sorry for the bumbling around. You can see the tide has started to come in, and my path back is not as clear. It'll be simple, but I might trip a little bit, so just bear with me. Okay, so backdoor Roth, again, you can Google that term. You do want to talk to an accountant on this, but it's not really super complicated. And essentially what you can do is you can open up a non-deductible IRA. You can open up a non-deductible IRA, and then you can convert it into a Roth. And, you know, just some things, and again, an accountant can tell you more about this, but you have to first convert your older traditional IRA, so you can't just convert the new one in. And as you convert a traditional IRA, that conversion is going to trigger taxable income for you. So you want to talk to your accountant and make sure it makes sense for you to do it. But then there's also something called the mega backdoor Roth, and boy, this is just it. You know, when I hear the word mega backdoor Roth, I'm thinking, you know, oh, we're really getting into the gray area now, which I'm not a fan of. But really it's not. It's just using a Roth 401k to do some of these things. If you have access to a Roth 401k at work, any 401k at work, the 2023 limits for the individual contribution is $22,500. If you're over 50 years old, you have what's called the catch-up provision for $7,500. So if you're over 50, you can put in, you know, $30,000, and that's just your contribution. Your employer can put in above and beyond that. And the limit for the employee and the employer is quite high. It's $66,000 a year. Now, if you're putting in $30,000 of your money, not many employers are going to put in $33,000 a year. Or what would it be? 36? Yeah, 36,000. If you're putting in 30, excuse me, as I try to avoid stepping in the Puget Sound here. But not many employers are going to do that. But I have seen that. It tends to be doctors and lawyers, accountants that are very savvy on these things. But you know, can you count on your employer putting in $5,000 or $10,000? I've seen that quite often. So the mega backdoor Roth conversion is basically just to use your 401k. And then there's something called a solo 401k. Now, so those are the max limits, but you can have multiple 401ks. You just can't go over that limit. Again, for the employee contribution, if you're 50 or older, you can't go over 30,000. And between the employer and the employee, you can't go over $66,000 a year. But, you know, if you have a side job, let's say you have a business that's, you know, making money, it's a somewhat profitable business outside of your main job, you can use that. And there you can use something called a solo 401k. And so now you can combine those two, and again, it's the individual limit. You can't go over that between the two, and then the employer contribution. But you can have your main employer putting in $5,000 or $10,000 a year, and then if this is a company that you own, again, you want to talk to an accountant or maybe even a tax attorney and make sure. I think it does matter how your company is set up, but you can set up your company in such a way that you can make another employer contribution. So so that's one strategy to get more contributions in, but that's still not going to get you. Well, it could. I'm gonna share a strategy that could get you to that $1 million in today's value. But another thing you can do now, I'm not a big fan of this, but you know, you make your own decision. I want you to know it does exist. and that's called a self-directed IRA, where you can make investments in privately held companies. And I think, you know, the famous story is there's a gentleman, a very successful entrepreneur and venture capitalist named Peter Thiel. He was one of the founders of PayPal, along with actually Elon Musk and several other people. The founder of LinkedIn, whose name is escaping me right now, but he was part of that, the PayPal mafia. And so Peter used his Roth IRA to hold his PayPal holdings and to invest in some of these PayPal mafias, including, I'm sorry, I'm spacing his name, the founder of LinkedIn. And then famously, he was one of the first investors. I believe he invested $500,000, the first institutional money into Facebook, which is now Meta. So that obviously worked out very well. And rumors are, you know, his Roth IRA now is worth billions of dollars that'll never be taxed. Now, you know, that's an example of that working very, very well. I'm not a fan of the self-directed IRAs, just Roth IRAs, just because they tend to be expensive and there can be complications associated with it. But now you know it exists if you didn't know. And again, if these things are interesting to you, look it up. But so how do you get $1 million in today's dollars in a Roth IRA so that when you're retired, you have access to $1 million of tax-free money? And before I get there, hopefully you found this information so far helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up. It really does help the algorithm. But with no further ado, you know, if you just do basic math, let's say you're 40 years old, and you put money into your Roth, your 401k, your Roth 401k, and then when you leave your job, you convert that Roth 401k into a Roth IRA. So if you're 40 years old, you still have 25 years until you retire. And I did the math, and if between you and your employer, you put in $28,650. Now, not everybody can do that, right? Again, the limit just for an employee under 50, so if you're 40, you're not by definition over 50. You can only do $22,500 at that point. But, you know, if your employer put in just a little over $6,000 a year, there's your $28,650. You do that for 25 years, and if you can get an 8% return on that for 25 years, which is, it's not a low number, it's not easy to do, but it's within the realm of possibility. You get an 8% return on that, you're gonna have, when you're 65 years old, $2.1 million. And remember, the title of this video is how to have access to $1 million tax-free. And I don't like playing the game of, you know, if you did half of that, so I could have said, you know, if you put in $14,825, you'd have $1 million. But you really won't, right? Because we're all thinking $1 million in today's dollars. But really, what people want, you know, $1 million in 25 years isn't what it is today. So, but if you put in that $28,650, you'll have $2.1 million. And if you assume the rate of inflation over that 25 years is 3%, which I think is, you know, who knows, but I think it's doable. Then in today's dollars, you'd have access to $1 million. So that's the strategy. There's nothing gray area about it. It's pretty straightforward. Again, if this sounds like something that you're interested in, I'd suggest you talk to your accountant. First, do some research, make sure it's something you're interested in. But I think it's important to have access to money to take out of your accounts that's not going to be taxed, right? The challenge with a traditional IRA, a traditional 401k, is every dollar you take out of your account is going to be taxed as ordinary income. And in some ways, that's why a traditional IRA and a 401k, I think it's one of the biggest negatives of it, is some of your investments might have qualified for long-term capital gains. And this traditional IRA wrapper around your account is essentially converting things that would have been taxed at capital gains rate or qualified dividend rates, which is quite a bit less than ordinary income for many people. Not always, again, check with your accountant. But in general, qualified dividends are taxed at 15%. Plus you've got other upcharges like the Affordable Care Act upcharge, stuff like that. But anyways, much lower than most people's ordinary income. So there are disadvantages with a traditional IRA and a traditional 401k, but this is as straightforward as you get to get access to tax-free money that's growing. The earnings are growing tax-free as well. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up. It really does help YouTube find other people that this video can help. And as the kids say, thumbs for likes and subs for love. Do leave me a comment as well. If you haven't subscribed, think about subscribing. This is what I talk about. I talk about strategies to get ready for retirement and to thrive in retirement. And until next time, I'm Asul, encouraging you to take full advantage of the youth of your senior years. Remember, you're only young once. Let's use our time wisely.